Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
How would you react if a stranger stopped you as a child and seemed to recognize something truly terrifying in you before you even understood it yourself? What would you do if a phrase you once heard in childhood returned years later in the middle of an impossible haunting? How would you explain a presence that appears very rarely, years apart, but knows exactly where you are each time? And how would you cope if the thing you feared was following you might not be outside your home at all? As always, we never promise any answers to those questions, but we will do our very best to look down each and every path on episode 7 of the Dark Paranormal. Live from Liverpool, the Dark Paranormal with Kevin Eustace. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 7 of season 24. I know I've not gone mad or forgot about the new intro. I thought for episode 7 we would just throw in a piece of nostalgia at the start. And why not? The number 7 is historically linked with magic, mystery, and things that we generally can't explain. And things that cannot be explained is what this episode quite literally encompasses. There's also that superstition of things taking place in threes, and we touch on that in this episode also. As always, a huge thank you to our Patreon team who allow this show to go out each and every week for free to everyone. Now, if you wish to become a Patreon, the link is in the show notes, as is the link to submit your own experience. I'll give more details on the perks of being a Patreon at the end of this episode, so do stay tuned. And we are giving a free week away when you go to that link. But right now, it's time to say what I say each and every week, which is please lower your lights, make yourself comfortable, and most importantly, leave your disbelief at the door, as we hear what it's like under the Black Star. Hi Kev, I've been a listener of the show for about 3 years now, and I've finally built up the courage to sit down and get this over to you. To completely honest, I'm feeling a bit sick even looking at the keyboard. I don't think I've ever told the full scope of this to anyone, not even my husband. Parts of it, sure, but never the whole chronological thread. Before I do dive into things, I think it's important to let you know things about me, because I'm not really the type of person who goes looking for ghosts or spirits. I'm 36 now, and I work as a senior project manager for a civil engineering firm here in Toronto. Though I was born and raised in the UK, not too far from you. My entire day-to-day life is dictated by spreadsheets, structure, integrity, budgets, and hard, provable logic. If you can't measure it or test it, it generally doesn't factor into my worldview. I don't do horoscopes, I don't do tarot cards. I'm not a particularly religious person. But the things that have happened to me over the course of my life, in particular, 3 distinct, isolated events spaced years apart, have left a dent in my rational mind that I simply can't smooth over. My mother's side of the family has always had a strange reputation back in England. My grandmother was Irish, from a tiny village in County Mayo, and my mum used to joke that Nana had the sight. As a kid, I thought that just meant she was unusually good at knowing things before they happened. I treated it like she had some quirky generational intuition. But looking back now, I wonder if there was a heavier, darker weight to it all, and they just didn't want to frighten me. My very earliest memory of anything unexplainable happening was when I was around 7 years of age. It must have been December 96 or 97. My mum had taken me shopping in Manchester city centre for Christmas. The air was freezing. It smelt of roasted chestnuts, diesel fumes and damp wool. The streets were absolutely gridlocked with people. I'm small now. I'm 5'6". Back then I was small for my age, of course. So my view of the world was basically a forest of adult hips and shopping bags. I held tightly to my mum's gloved hands, my little legs working double time just to keep up with her as we swept along towards Market Street. Even amongst the overwhelming noise of the city, I suddenly became aware of a commotion a few yards ahead of where we were. People were stopping or stepping aside awkwardly, turning around with annoyed faces. Someone was clearly moving rather aggressively against the flow. Through a brief gap in the crowd, I caught a glimpse of what was causing it. Or should I say, who? It was a very small, very old woman. She couldn't have been any more than 5 foot herself. Completely draped in dark, heavy layers, a stark black headscarf tied tightly under her chin. Her face was incredibly lined, honestly like cracked leather, although her movements were surprisingly frantic and determined. The moment she cleared the final row of people, she headed directly for my mother and me. She stepped directly into our path, physically blocking us. My mum, startled but maintaining her polite British reserve, frowned down at this lady. "Excuse me," she said, her tone clearly implying move out the way. But the old woman didn't look at my mum, because from the absolute second she'd burst through that crowd, her eyes had been locked onto me. They were dark, watery, and intensely focused. They weren't angry. They were filled with a terrifying, urgent recognition. My mum tried to step to the right, pulling my hand to guide me around this woman. But this woman, still staring directly at my face, shot her arm out with unbelievable speed and grabbed me by the forearm. My mum froze. Before she could even demand to let me go, the old woman whipped her head around to my mum, looked up at her, leaned in slightly, and hissed through cracked lips. "She was born under a black star." I've replayed how this woman said it over and over again ever since that moment, and her tone wasn't a curse or a threat. It sounded like an absolute, dreadful statement of fact. My mum's face went pale. I mean, entirely pale. She yanked my arm free from the woman. Then she grabbed both my shoulders and pulled me in front of her, pushing me past the woman and back into the moving crowd. As my mum pushed, I couldn't help but turn around to look back at the woman, who, as I looked, was again looking me in the face, and she made the sign of the cross over her chest with a very trembling hand. Her eyes tracked me as I was dragged away. My mum was walking incredibly fast now, her breathing shallow. "There are some absolute nutters out today, bloody Christmas," she muttered, squeezing my hand so tight it hurt. I looked up at my mum and she had a stony fixed gaze straight ahead, desperate to brush the entire thing off. But I couldn't let it go. As we moved further down the street, I kept glancing back over my shoulder. The street was still packed, dozens of tall adults. However, now and again I'd catch a glimpse of her, even for a fraction of a second, and she was still stood perfectly still in the middle of that pavement, people swerving around her sideways like water around a stone, and no matter how far we walked or how much my position changed, if I did make eye contact, it was immediate, as if she didn't need to see me to know exactly where I was. Finally, we turned a sharp corner into a side street, and the visual contact and the woman was gone. When we finally got home, I thought Mum would immediately bring it up with my dad, but she didn't say a word. So I brought it up a few days later, and my mother snapped at me rather uncharacteristically, telling me to stop thinking about such silly things. So I buried it. I convinced myself it was just a strange, isolated encounter with some poor old demented lady who had no idea what she was saying. And that was that. 10 years passed. I grew up. I went to university. And I completely forgot about the Black Star woman. It became nothing more than a weird anecdote I'd occasionally think about if I ever went home or I passed through Manchester. The second incident happened when I was 19. It was the first summer after my first year of university. I went back to stay with my parents in their semi-detached in a quiet suburb just outside of Cheshire. It's an ordinary, boring brick house built in the late 80s. Nothing old, nothing historic. It was a Tuesday night, around 2 a.m. I'd been up late studying for a retake exam, and the house was dead silent. I turned off my desk lamp and I climbed into bed. I lay on my side facing the window. The curtains were closed, but the streetlights from the front of the house were casting a very faint ambient orange glow along the top edge of the ceiling. Now I was just on the precipice of falling asleep, that heavy, comfortable state where you can still see with your eyes, but your thoughts have started to drift into nonsense. And I hear a sound. It sounded exactly like someone knocking their knuckle against a hollow wooden panel, coming from the corner of my room where the built-in wardrobe was. I lay perfectly still, listening. After about 10 seconds of silence, it happened again. I reasoned it was the central heating pipes cooling down, but then, realizing how hot it had been that summer, and we hadn't had the heating on, my brain moved to a mouse behind the plasterboard. Annoying, but not terrifying, so I rolled over onto my back, intending to pull the duvet over my ears. But the moment my back hit the mattress, the temperature in the room plummeted. I do not mean a chill, I mean an instantaneous, unnatural drop that made the breath catch in my throat. Within seconds, and I do mean seconds, I could see the faint mist of my own breath rising in the dim light. A wave of intense, primal dread washed over me. The kind of fear that doesn't come from your brain, but from your animal instincts. Then the tapping stopped, In its place came a sound that made my stomach drop to a bottomless pit. It was the sound of a long, slow, deep inhalation of breath. But it didn't sound human. It sounded heavy, wet, raspy, like air being forced into fluid-filled lungs. And it didn't come from the wardrobe. It sounded like it was originating from the empty space directly above my face, 2 inches from my nose. I tried to scream, but my throat was entirely paralyzed. I couldn't move my fingers. I was paralyzed. I couldn't even blink. I lay there, staring wide-eyed at the dark ceiling, my heart hammering so violently I thought it would fracture my ribs. As I stared upwards, the faint orange light bleeding in from the curtains began to distort. A shape began to manifest directly above my bed. Not a solid figure, not a phantom in a sheet. A localized patch of absolute, impenetrable blackness. Darker than the darkest part of the room, a dense, swirling void about the size of a beach ball that seemed to absorb whatever light remained in the room. That raspy breathing was still there. It seemed frantic. The air around my face began to churn, cold, smelling this faint, static electricity, stagnant water type smell. The void began to stretch downwards, elongating towards my chest. I felt an immense physical pressure settle onto my sternum, like a heavy, unseen hand crushing the oxygen out of my lungs. I was suffocating, staring directly into this twisting, faceless mass of pure darkness. But inside it, I couldn't see eyes or a mouth, but I could feel a consciousness, an ancient predatory awareness that just didn't want to scare me. It felt like it was recognizing me, like it had been looking for me. In my mind, a sudden vivid image of the old woman in the black headscarf flashed. With a monumental, agonizing effort of my will, I managed to twitch my right big toe. This physical movement broke the paralysis instantly. I gasped for air, bolted upright in bed, and slammed my hand onto the bedside light. The room flooded with the warm yellow light, and the pressure was gone. The cold evaporated with it, and everything seemed back to normal. I hugged my knees and rocked back and forth uncontrollably until the sun came up. I tried to tell myself it was a textbook case of hypnagogic hallucination, sleep paralysis, REM intrusion, the night hag phenomena. It was a comforting scientific explanation, and believe me, I clung to it like a life jacket, telling myself my brain had simply plugged into the memory of the old woman into a standard nightmare through my hypnagogic state. And I managed to believe that logic for nearly 15 years. Until 2 years ago. Okay guys, I need to talk to you about money. Why? Well, it's high on my agenda at the moment as I'm looking to move not just house, but country. So I have a money goal that I'm really striving to achieve. And let's just say, to say I've got somewhere to go is an understatement. But I'm trying not to fixate on where my money is now, because so many people are focused on where their money is today. Acorns is the financial wellness app that cares about where your money's going tomorrow. And something I think is wonderful that Acorns have is the Acorns Potential screen, so you can find out what your money is capable of. You guys know I've worked with Acorns for a while, and the reason I love working with them is because they take away the scare factor from investing. But in reality, investment and investing should mean the same for one person as it does for the next. Acorns is a smart way to give your money a chance to grow. It's easy. You can sign up in minutes and start automatically investing your spare money, even if all you've got spare change. Acorns is an all-in-one. No more finance apps cluttering up your phone. With Acorns, you can invest, save, and give your money a chance to grow in one trusted place. Sign up now and Acorns will boost your new account with a $5 bonus investment. Join the over 14 million all-time customers who've already saved and invested over $27 billion with Acorns. Paid non-client endorsements. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 2 compensation provided. Potential subject to various factors such as customers' accounts, age, and investment settings. Does not include Acorns fees. Results do not predict or represent the performance of any Acorns portfolio. Investment results will vary. Investing involves risk. Acorn Advisors LLC and SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/Dark Paranormal.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
By 2024, I'd moved to Canada for my career. My husband and I bought a renovated townhouse in a quiet elder neighborhood in Toronto. Life was good, busy, and completely normal. The events of my youth were buried deep in my past. It was a Friday evening in late November. My husband was away in Montreal for a business conference, so I was home alone with our golden retriever, Buster. Now, Buster is the most laid-back, unbothered dog you would ever meet. He doesn't bark at the mailman, he doesn't chase squirrels, and generally he sleeps about 18 hours a day. Around 11:30 p.m, I was in the kitchen pouring myself a glass of water before heading to bed. Buster was curled up on his mattress in the corner of the living room, snoring softly as usual. But then he stopped snoring. He quickly sat bolt upright, his front legs completely rigid, his ears pinned flat against his head. All of the hackles along his entire spine were stood on end, and he was staring intensely at the narrow hallway that led from the living room to our front door. "Buster, what is it?" I asked, my voice sounding thin in the quiet house. He didn't look at me. Instead, he let out a sound I'd never heard from him before. A low, guttural, trembling growl that vibrated through the floorboards. Not a defensive bark, a sound of absolute frantic terror I would imagine from a dog. He began to back up slowly, his paws slipping on the hardwood floor, keeping his eyes locked on the dark hallway. A familiar, icy dread began to creep up my neck. Our front door has a small, arched, decorative window near the top, about 6 feet off the ground. The hallway was dark, but the streetlights outside illuminated the frosted glass, casting a pale textured square of light onto the wall. As I watched, a shadow moved across the frosted glass from outside. Someone was standing on our front porch. I panicked. My immediate thought, of course, was a burglar. I grabbed my phone off the counter and took a few cautious steps backwards into the living room, so I could still see down the hall, but I was more or less hidden. "Hello," I called out, trying to sound authoritative. "Who's there? I'm calling the police." But this shadow didn't move away. It stood perfectly still. But as I stared at it through the frosted texture, I realized the proportions were completely wrong. The shadow was positioned far too high up on that glass, as though whoever or whatever was out there was hovering, pressing their face directly against it. Then, Just like my paralysis in my bedroom, the temperature in the kitchen plummeted. 1 second it was nice and warm, the next I was covered in goosebumps and I could see my breath in the dim light. God love him, but my poor Buster let out a sharp, terrified yelp, turned tail and scrambled frantically into the downstairs bathroom. Whether it was him or something else, I'm not sure, but the door slammed shut behind him. I backed up, so I was left stood alone in the middle of the living room. And then, from the front door, a sound began to echo down the hallway. Slow, deliberate. I'd moved back to the doorway and was looking at the glass, and I was completely frozen. I kept my eyes locked on that glass window at the top of the door. As the knocking continued, the shadow against the glass began to shift. The edges didn't look like a face or a head anymore. It began to twist and swirl, losing what would have been its neck. So it was like a slow morphing circle, a shifting mass of absolute darkness again that seemed to be pulling light from my hallway through the window into it. And then a voice drifted down that hallway. Not a loud shout, a faint, raspy, wet whisper that sounded as though it came from someone whose lungs were filled with fluid. And it didn't come from the porch. It felt as though it vibrated directly inside the walls of my house. Or maybe inside the space behind my own ears. It didn't say my name, it didn't threaten me. It just repeated a single phrase in a rhythmic, monotonous cadence that matched the knocking. Black star. Black star. The sheer unnatural wrongness of the entire situation broke me into a panic I didn't know I was capable of. I flung the door open where Buster was, I threw myself inside with him, and I slammed that door shut, turning the deadbolt. I huddled on the tile floor with my arms wrapped tightly around Buster's neck. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and called the police, and they arrived fast, no more than 7 or 8 minutes. And the moment I heard the sirens approaching, the freezing cold in the house snapped back to normal. The whispering stopped entirely. 2 officers searched the entire perimeter with high-powered flashlights. They found absolutely nothing. No one on the porch, no sign of footprints, no forced entry attempts. One of the officers paused at the front door. He shone his torch closely at the wood just below the small frosted window. "Excuse me, miss," he said, turning to me with a puzzled expression. "Did you or your husband have some work done on this door recently? Or maybe have some kids messing around with charcoal?" I shook my head and asked why. He pointed at the door. I headed over. Directly below the window, etched into the wood, was a mark. Not a deep scratch made by a tool. It looked as though someone had taken a piece of heavy, greasy soot and drawn a symbol onto the grain. Crude, uneven, but unmistakable. A solid 5-pointed star, completely filled in with dense, matte black residue. I told the officer it must have been neighborhood kids playing a prank. They took a report from me and they left. The second they pulled out of the driveway, I ran to the kitchen, I got a bucket of hot soapy water and a scrub brush, and I went to work. I scrubbed at that mark for over 20 minutes until my knuckles were red. But that residue seemed to have seeped into the wood itself. Despite me spending nearly an hour on it that night, and a good 30 minutes for the next 5 or 6 nights, then 2 coats of paint, done by my husband about a month later, you can still see that star, especially if the sun catches the door in a certain light. and this is 2 years later. Within those 2 years, though, nothing has happened. My life went back to normal, structured, spreadsheet-driven, same house, same dog, same quiet evenings, thank God. But something changed last week, which led to me deciding to put all this in an email to you. I, twice a year now, come and visit my mother in Cheshire. My dad passed away 6 years ago with a stroke, but although my mother is still alive, she's suffering from early-stage dementia. Her memory's been slipping significantly over the last 2 years, and when I fly back, she often mixes up the past with the present. Just before my flight back to Canada last week, when I'd been to visit my mother in the assisted living facility, I was sat by her bedside holding her hand. We were talking about nothing in particular, and as you do with people who have dementia, I was agreeing with anything she said, even if it made no sense. Just anything to keep the conversation calm, really. Then suddenly, she turned her head and looked at me. And when I say look, I mean she wide-eyed stared at me. Her eyes looked completely clear, the way they used to look when I was a little girl. She squeezed my hand so hard I thought she'd break my fingers. I even said, ow, and tried to remove her hand. I'm sorry, love, she whispered, her voice cracking. I shouldn't have let her touch your arm in Manchester that day. My breath caught in my throat. It was the first time she'd acknowledged that day in almost 30 years. Mum, I said, leaning in gently. Don't be daft, it was some lunatic woman like you said at the time. My mother shook her head. A look of profound, agonizing sorrow washed over her face, and then tears started rolling down her cheeks. No, she whispered, her voice dropping so low I could barely hear it over the hum of the medical equipment in the corridor. You don't understand. She wasn't looking at you because you were special, darling. She was looking at you because she knew what was already inside. Waiting. Before I could ask what she meant, the clarity left her eyes. She blinked, looked away, looked at me and smiled and asked me if the milkman had been. Feeling almost concussed, I just said, yeah, Mum, he's been. This is my 5th day back in Toronto. I haven't had a full night's sleep since. I keep looking at that faint, faded black star on my front door. I think about every single one of those experiences and how they happened almost exactly 10 to 15 years apart. I keep thinking about the fact I'm 36 now, and the timeline is stretching out again. I used to think whatever this thing is, it was following me, hunting me down from the outside. But ever since my mum whispered those words, I can't shake this intrusive thought out of my head. What if that old mad woman in Manchester wasn't making a prediction? What if she was just stating a fact about what I am? And what if the things that keep coming to my door aren't trying to break in? They're just waiting for whatever is inside me to wake up and let them in. I apologise for this incredibly long essay, Kev. If you do read this on your podcast, it will be interesting to know if anyone else has ever heard of this phrase, this born under the black star, or if anyone knows exactly what it means, because I haven't got the courage to Google it. Yes, me who doesn't believe in any of these things. Yes, me who's just sent you an email containing nothing but these things. I'm getting very, very tired of looking into the dark corners of my house every night, wondering when the next cycle will begin. Hopefully it won't. But if it does, I'll try to let you know. Hopefully you don't hear from me again. Thanks for reading and keep up the amazing work with the show. Sarah, Toronto, Canada. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for your submission. And when I say thank you, part of me doesn't mean that. Because genuinely, this episode may just be 32 to 34, whatever, minutes in length. It's took me 8 hours to record so far. And the reason for that, and I'm not putting it down to your story or experiences, but there has been a series of incidents around me recording this that I wouldn't normally encounter in a year of doing any podcasts. And I'm talking about as I'm just talking, the mouse has literally just moved from a perfectly straight desk to the floor. So there will be a pause a second while I pick the mouse up. And I'm back now, and I've literally had a cigarette in between you just hearing my voice and now. Because I saw that out of the corner of my eye, moving, sliding and falling, and it's a wireless mouse. It's not like something could have pulled it off. Perfectly straight desk, I can't explain it. But I'm almost happy that happened on the recording, because that is almost emblematic of what's gone on throughout this recording. There have been, for example, music files that you can hear in the background that, for some reason, mid-recording, decided to change to double speed. Now, they can't do that unless I physically go into the file and change them, but they've been doing that. The laptop's turned itself off several times. I've used a different laptop. It's done the same thing. Now, also, we're in the middle of a heat wave here in the UK as I record this. I'm literally sat recording just in shorts. Not that you needed to know that, but I am. Halfway through recording this episode, I became ice cold. Now, I'm in the attic to record where the studio is. It's the hottest room in the house. That's why I was wearing shorts. But for a good, maybe 5 minutes, I became ice cold. I literally had to leave the room to warm up. And when I came back, it was back to its usual stifling self. So when you say you hope I never hear from you again, I think I'm with you on that one, Sarah. I'm not going to personally look into what that means, the black star thing, that is, just because although it is 3 p.m. in the UK, it is blisteringly hot outside, the sun is shining, beaming through into the studio. I am terrified. I'll be perfectly honest. Now, usually I would tell you all about the perks you get from our Patrons right now. I would say please check out the show notes. There's a full explanation in there about what you can receive by becoming a patron. Believe me, it's an amazing place to be. And if I wasn't the host of the show, I would definitely become a Patreon. So check out that link in the show notes where you can get a free week trial. And speaking of which, there is a show I do on Patreon called After Dark, where I try to disseminate episodes. This one will be a hell of a one to watch, as it's a video one unedited. Also, there is, of course, the link to send your story in, and please do so if you have one to send in. But right now, I'm going to end this episode so I can leave this room and I can shake off this experience, because I genuinely do not like it. Not one bit. And I know this isn't the worst experience that we've had in terms of evil or things such as that, but I will say one thing from the bottom of my heart. This is the one experience which feels like it's in the room with me as I speak. Now, I know it's not. Believe me, I know that. I know my mind is playing tricks on me, but it's playing tricks on me at 3 p.m. in the afternoon on a very sunny day, not at midnight in an empty house. So I'm going to call it a day for today. Thank you all for joining me for episode 7. I knew it was going to be different. I just didn't expect this different. And I can't wait to speak to you all again next week for episode 8. And here's hoping it's less eventful. Until then, remember, whenever you discuss the paranormal, always try and leave some of your disbelief at the door. And stay safe, take care, and goodbye.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.